Hi, Olivia. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. So, have your past 7 months been going?
Oh boy. Well, look, I think like so many people, it started off like a wacky staycation at first. I literally was filming like fun skits where I would put like a ball and pantyhose on top of my head and try to knock bottles over. Um, and then and then it kind of got really real. So it's been. I think it's been a lot of things. I think it's been productive. I think it's been lazy. I think it's been heartbreaking. And I think it's been, you know, hopeful as well that maybe out of all the chaos, something better is going to emerge.
Yeah.
So, all those different things side by side on the same day sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I love your initiative with Book Warehouse Vancouver with giving away how to be anti-racist and anti-racist baby. So, how did you become involved with that initiative, and why did you choose those books in particular?
I, you know, I definitely didn't start the pandemic thinking in any way I'm going to become an activist out of it. I think, I've been in the public eye in some way, shape, or form since I was 19. And I think I recognized really early on in my life that, or at least I chose to use whatever platform I had in service of causes that I care about, whether it be mental health and wellness, whether it be speaking out on behalf of my cultural community. Um, so it all really, it really was a confluence of events, wasn't it? I mean, with a pandemic and then the uptick of violence against Asians around the world, that really broke my heart. And then I call it the horrible trifecta of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd. And, you know, that made me go, I know how painful it is for me to walk around in Asian skin, and I will never know what it is to walk around in, black, brown, or indigenous skin. But I would feel like a hypocrite um, championing and trying to point things out on behalf of my own community and then not looking over here and going, they're going through something just as bad and worse, right?
Yeah.
In a way, it's apples and oranges. It's different, um, but I that's kind of how I started getting into it, and I heard Dr. Kendi on a Brene Brown podcast actually, and I really liked the things he had to say. So I wanted the book for myself, and then I thought, you know what? Why don't I just buy a bunch and see if other people want them? You know,
Yeah. What was the response like?
it was great actually. I probably had about three times the amount of responses than I actually was able to and I thought about buying more books so everybody could have one.
Mhm.
But like a lot of people, my cash flow had stopped with the pandemic. So, there was a budget. Um, but it was great. It actually restored a lot of hope. And I think it was really nourishing for me to see the response and to see such heartfelt, genuine responses from people from all kinds of communities and all kinds of cultures and age ranges saying like, yeah, I want to learn too. And I want to talk about this too. And I want to keep the conversation going too.
Yeah. So, for those that don't know about Warrior, tell them about the show and who you play.
I play, well, first let me back up a little and say that Warrior is a Bruce Lee legacy project, and I'm so proud to be a part of it. It is a concept that Bruce Lee himself tried to shop around Hollywood over 50 years ago at a time when Hollywood did not feel like the audiences wanted to see an Asian man star in anything, let alone his own TV show. So it was a real point of pain for Bruce Lee. Um, but fast forward, 40 some years later, and his daughter, Shannon Lee, managed to take his concept out of a box in a garage, teaming up with Justin Lin of Fast and Furious fame and Jonathan Tropper from Banshee fame, and create the show that represented something her father always hoped to actualize in the world. And on that show, I play one of two fictional characters actually based on real characters in life. So I play Atoy, who in San Francisco history was a true life notorious madame, arguably the first Asian immigrant to use the US court system to protect her business and her assets. So she was a boss. And I get to play a fictionalized version of her in our world, which is set 4 years before the Chinese Exclusion Act, in an America that is both exploiting the Chinese and trying to drive them out of the country. So a lot of parallels with what's going on in 2020, unfortunately.
Yeah. And so the marketing materials describe her as a hustler. How would you describe her?
I think a hustler is a I think a hustler is a great way to describe Atoy, our Atoy. I would also add she's boss. And in a way, I've always felt like she's a crime boss in her own right, because she moves in these circles that are so criminalized by proper society, but those circles exist because proper society will not let the Chinese exist anywhere near their circles. So I think in another time or place, Atoy would have been a groundbreaking leader of some kind of industry. But instead she does what she can, and she runs a brothel, and she's got to keep up with the boys.
Yeah. And so this season, I want to keep it as like non-spoilery as possible, just so for people coming new to the show that they have like more access to information about it. So this season we see a progression in her. Perhaps she's, coming to terms with a lot of things that she had to bury for survival's sake. So can you talk a little about crafting your portrayal of her and her progression this season?
Absolutely. This season, I think a lot of the conflicts that exist within Toy's chosen path, the situations that she creates out of her own making, and the conflicts that exist within her heart and mind really come to a head. I think that the contradictions and the flaws and the justifications that she makes, really almost like this unasked for detox start bubbling to the surface, in part because she meets a character who is based on the real life Donaldina Cameron. If you don't know Donaldina Cameron, look her up on the internet. An incredible story. And I think that juxtaposition of two women who come from such different spectrums of society, but also actually having some of the same values in mind and some of the same altruistic tendencies on behalf of, the Chinese people. It's an interesting kind of catalyst for an implosion. And it manifests in Atoy's physical world and, of course, her inner world.
Mm-hmm. And speaking about her physical world, the costumes on this show, oh my goodness. And just the production design that goes into it, the amount of care and just, intricate details that you just have to watch it a few times just to pick up on everything. So what's it like to inhabit that world?
It's so much fun. I mean, I'm a very kinetic actor, so I get very influenced by what I can use around me. I love when production designers set up a world and the prop masters come in and they, create and add their touches and flourishes, and the art department comes in and they add their touches. You just have to step in, and already there's so much that your imagination can play off of. So I always love like actually using what they put in front of you, because if it's my place, then I should be able to like just pick up, whatever's around and use it. So that was really fun, and the costumes also really influenced the way I move, because the trains are insane. Stilettos were never meant to be functional. Um, so it really slowed my movements down simply because I didn't want to fall over. But it also kind of gave I called it the Autoy glide, because you don't want to clump in that costume. But it was also really interesting because the long Z actually represented the past, the Hop Way, who's those guys, they look very GQ. It makes no sense for that time era. We break a lot of rules in our period piece. They really were meant to represent the present, and Atoy was always meant to represent the future. So her costumes very much were designed to be against what should have existed at that time, and should feel a little more contemporary to us as the audience, and should feel like something that you see on a fashion walk, that you go, who would wear that in life? Toy would wear that in life. And that was a very purposeful decision by Jonathan Tropper, our show creator.
And without giving much away, have you had a favorite scene to shoot?
Oh, so
could be
many.
Last season too.
You know what? The first thing that popped in my mind, and I don't want to get into too much detail because it would give away something huge, but episode 8, I have a huge set piece. We call them set pieces when they're anyway. I have a huge sequence coming up in episode 8 that I think should be kind of horrible to watch. I don't want to give anything away. It should break some hearts. But just know that for me as the actress, it was so much fun to shoot because, number one, I was actually able to move so much more freely, and number two, like I said, I'm a kinetic actor, and there was a lot of kinetic energy going on in that scene. I think people will figure out what scene I'm talking about.
And have you have a favorite memory from set?
Oh, wow. I will say that one of my favorite, I mean, so many, like the cast, we all got along like, we just all got along so well. So many great memories of just going out and hanging out with each other. But I must say that one memory that immediately popped to mind when you said that was pranking Dean Jagger, who plays Leary on our show. So he's the boss of the Irish laborers. So on our show, we are natural enemies. But in life, he's like such a good guy. He's such a sweetheart, and he's the funnest one for so many of us to just fuck with. Excuse my French, but because he's such a good sport about everything. So I pulled a huge prank on him, season 2, and I'm very, very proud of how well it went off. And yeah, it cracked up a lot of people on set. So.
Very cool. So for those just coming to the show now, why is it important that they watch it? Why is it important that they watch it now?
Well, first, I'm biased, but it's a great show. Like I do, I really do. I think it's a fun show. I think it's a really entertaining show. So just first and foremost, in this landscape where we have so much on television, I guarantee you there's nothing like it. And part of why there's nothing like it is because I think it is the only 1 hour drama that exists on television right now that centers Asian faces and an Asian storyline and a storyline that is so relevant to Asian American history that, you know, parallels Asian Canadian history, Asian Australian history, Asian South African history. And that's something that's really important to me for obvious reasons. And obviously, with everything that's going on in the world right now, with certain political figures trying to scapegoat the Chinese and defying science, and you know, inflaming fears and stoking violence, I I I hope the show isn't triggering for people who are dealing with that in their daily lives. I hope that for them, this is actually a bit of a release where they can see heroes on screen that look like them in a time that reflects them now. And for people outside of that immediate population that's affected by all the hate rhetoric right now, I hope they, you know, learn something about, the experience of Asian Americans and just Asians around the world in terms of immigration and, you know, just settling in and just opening their minds and their hearts and their empathy for that story. But that they also just really, at the end of the day, just walk away going like, oh, that was awesome. And that was so much fun to watch.
Yes, for sure. And finally, what have you been watching or reading lately that you've really loved?
Okay, well, shout out to my buddy Manny Jacinto, fellow Canadian actor who's on The Good Place.
Yep.
I literally just started the last season of The Good Place,
Oh, I
and I'm
love.
so excited for that. It's so funny because if you look at my career, I in the last 5 years take on such intense roles that have themes of war, espionage, you know, like Machiavellian worlds. But then Olivia, the human being, I'm always watching comedy. Um, so I just started The Good Place, and my brother just got me a subscription to the Criterion channel.
Oh.
So yeah, I'm excited to dive into, like, you know, the absolute like film bougie, you know, crowd of like, here's this obscure but, you know, incredible film that you must watch if you're a true cinephile. Yeah.
Yes. Film Twitter will love that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time, Olivia. I really appreciate it a lot. Keep doing what you're doing. The world
Thank
appreciates
you.
it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.